The first night in the gray zone teaches you how loud your body is, how your teeth click when you don't want them to, how your stomach decides to sing hymns at the worst time, how the joints in your knees can scream like a door hinge if you shift your weight wrong. The second night teaches you how loud your thoughts are. The third night is when the quiet starts talking back. It whispers in the pauses between distant artillery. It slides under your skin. It starts to bargain with you. Say something, move, do anything, prove you still exist. That's when people make mistakes. That's when people die. I learned that on the third night, with a dead man's flash drive in my pocket and a list of surnames I couldn't unread, and with the growing suspicion that my evacuation was never meant to save me. We were supposed to be in and out before dusk. Deliver, confirm, leave. That was the rhythm of volunteering in a war you could not stop. Small acts arranged like sandbags, stacked against something far larger. We carried medicine, filters, baby formula, batteries, anything that could keep ordinary life pretending it still had a schedule. I wasn't a hero. I was a man trying to stay useful enough that my own fear couldn't swallow me whole. The road into the village was a scar through fields that used to be wheat, a ribbon of asphalt chewed up by tracks and patched with crushed stone. On both sides, burned-out trees, blackened farm equipment, and signs that once held advertisements, now holding only wind. My driver, Pasha, talked too much when he was nervous. He filled the cabin with jokes that never reached his eyes. "After this," he said, steering around a crater like it was a puddle, "I'm opening a cafe. No politics, no news, only coffee. You can volunteer there. Bring sugar." I smiled, because smiling was cheaper than answering. We turned into the village, if you can call a place a village when half of it is missing. Houses with their roofs peeled back like tin lids, a school with shattered windows that looked like a mouth full of broken teeth, a bus stop with a bench still standing, as if the war had politely decided not to inconvenience waiting. We stopped near a clinic that had become a skeleton. The nurse met us at the doorway, her hands already reaching, her eyes already counting. 2 minutes, 3. We moved boxes like we were unloading guilt. Then the first incoming round landed somewhere close enough that the ground jumped. The second was closer. The third was not a sound so much as an enormous hand slamming down on the world. Pasha ducked instinctively, shoulders up, like it could protect him from physics. "Basement," the nurse shouted. "Down, down." I remember the smell of dust, sharp like crushed chalk, the way my tongue tasted metal, the way the sky went from gray to darker gray, as if a curtain had been pulled. We ran. The clinic's basement stairs were narrow. I went last, dragging the last box, because volunteering had taught me a stupid habit: never leave the last thing undone. Then the building above us shuddered. Something collapsed. The lights died. Someone screamed. Someone prayed. It lasted maybe 15 minutes, maybe an hour. Time behaves badly under bombardment. It stretches like gum and snaps. When it was quiet enough that the quiet felt suspicious, we climbed back up into air that smelled like burned plaster and wet earth. The van was gone. Not moved, not driven away. Gone in the way things are gone when a direct hit takes them and they become an idea, not an object. Pasha's phone had no signal. Mine didn't either. The nurse's face tightened. The lines shifted last week. Sometimes the village is ours. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's neither. The gray zone. A strip of land that belonged to maps but not to law. A place where both sides hunted and neither side admitted responsibility. "Your people will come," Pasha said, but his voice didn't believe it. I thought of Lena, of her neat logistics, her confident, "We've got an extraction." She'd said it yesterday, like she was ordering groceries. Extraction. a clean word for a messy thing. I looked at the clinic, the broken school, the empty road. I realized a truth so cold it felt like clarity. Nobody was coming on schedule. Not tonight. And if I stayed in the village, I'd be a stationary target. So I did what a lot of people do when reality turns to smoke. I followed the last plan I'd been given. The extraction point was 3 kilometers west, near an old pumping station by a drainage canal. Lena had said there would be a car, a password, a flashlight signal, 3 short, 1 long. I didn't tell the nurse I was leaving. I didn't tell Pasha. I didn't trust my own mouth to say it without sounding like a goodbye. I just tightened my backpack straps and started walking. The gray zone is not dramatic like movies. It is not constant gunfire and heroic sprints. It is mostly empty, which makes every sound personal. I kept off the main road because the main road is where people expect you to be. I moved between ruined gardens and fences that leaned like tired men. I stepped around debris, and every time glass shifted under my boot, my heart leaped as if the sound could travel miles. I passed a house where a child's bicycle lay in the yard, its front wheel bent. I passed a dog with no collar, watching me from behind a stump, ears flat. It didn't bark, it just stared, as if it had learned the rules too. When the light finally bled out of the sky, the world became a charcoal sketch, shapes without meaning, shadows that could be anything. I found shelter in a half-collapsed shed behind what used to be a grocery store. I wedged myself between a stack of rotting boards and a rusted refrigerator. I tried not to breathe like a living thing. That's the first night, learning to pretend you're not alive. I slept in slices. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crater where the van used to be. I heard the nurse's voice saying, "Sometimes it's neither." Sometime before dawn, I heard footsteps outside. Soft, measured, not the stumble of a drunk, not the rush of a frightened civilian. A patrol. I held my breath so long my vision sparkled. The footsteps paused. A beam of light slid across the ground, thin and searching, like a finger tracing a scar. Then a voice, low, bored, masculine, said something I couldn't quite make out. The answer came from another voice, closer, sharper. They moved on. Only when the sound faded did I realize my hands were shaking hard enough to make my backpack straps whisper against fabric. I pressed my palm against my mouth like I could physically keep fear inside. When morning finally came, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like exposure. I moved again. By late afternoon, I reached the pumping station, or what was left of it. Concrete walls pocked with shrapnel, a metal door hanging open like a broken jaw, a drainage canal beside it, black water barely moving, a slow artery of the land. I crouched in tall weeds and watched. No car, no signal, just wind worrying the grass, and a crow perched on a cracked pipe, looking like it owned the place. I checked my phone again, because hope is sometimes just repetition. No signal. I checked the radio. Dead. I waited until the sun touched the horizon, turning everything the color of bruises. Then I saw something that was not wind. A body, half in the weeds, half on the concrete slope down to the canal, face down, one arm stretched as if reaching for the water. At first I thought it was a civilian, someone who tried to cross and didn't make it. Then I saw the uniform. Not full kit, not official, a mismatched jacket, boots too clean for a man who'd walked far, a patch on the sleeve that looked like it had been torn off and re-sewn, a man trying to look like everyone and no one. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me not to touch anything in a war zone, because anything can be a message, anything can be a trap. But curiosity is its own hunger, and so is the need to understand why you're still alive when others aren't. He had a small backpack, cheap, civilian brand. His hands were stiff, his neck had a dark bruise under the collar, not from shrapnel, but from pressure.
Fingers? A cord? Something intimate. This wasn't random. I rolled him carefully, as gently as you roll a stranger when you're borrowing a piece of his fate. His eyes were open, not accusing, just empty in that way that makes you feel like you're looking at a room that's been abandoned mid-sentence. I searched his pockets with shaking fingers, hating myself even as I did it. Survival turns you into a thief of the dead. In the inside pocket of his jacket, I found a flash drive wrapped in tape and a folded paper list. Surnames, about 20, some with initials, a few with addresses, a few with notes, works at clinic, volunteer, bridge watch, has car. One name on the list hit me like a slap. Lena. Not my Lena, maybe. It could be a common surname. But the note beside it wasn't common. Coordinator, moves cargo, extraction plan. My stomach turned. I looked again. Another surname I recognized. Pasha's last name. Another, the nurse. The paper wasn't a list of donors. It was a list of targets, or assets, or compromises. A list of people whose lives could be traded. My mouth drew dry. In my pocket, my phone buzzed once. Just once, like the world was teasing me. One bar of signal appeared, then vanished. But the buzz was enough. Enough to tell me the gray zone wasn't empty anymore. I stared at the dead man again. I thought of Lena's calm voice. We've got an extraction. I thought of the pumping station, the designated point, the 3 kilometers west. And suddenly, the idea landed in my head with the weight of inevitability. I wasn't meant to be evacuated. I was meant to carry something. Maybe I was supposed to find this body, or maybe I was supposed to become a body and someone else would retrieve the flash drive from me. Either way, I was inside a plan that didn't include my consent. That's when the detective part of my brain, small, tired, but stubborn, woke up. If the extraction was real, why was it in the gray zone, at a place this exposed? If the list existed, who made it? If Lena was involved, was she compromised? Or was she the one compromising? And why would anyone set up a volunteer, someone who delivers baby formula and bandages, as bait? Unless the point wasn't me. Unless the point was trust.
The second night, I didn't dare stay near the pumping station. A place on a plan is a place that will be visited. I followed the canal south until the weeds grew high enough to swallow me. I found an old culvert beneath a broken road and crawled inside, mud soaking my sleeves. It stank of rot and damp concrete. Somewhere deeper, water dripped steadily, a metronome counting seconds you can't spend. I sat with my back against the wall and forced myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like I'd been taught in a workshop for stress management that everyone attended like it was a joke until it wasn't. My heart didn't care about workshops. It wanted to sprint. It wanted to scream. Instead, I listened. A dog barked far away. A vehicle passed on the main road, the engine sound distant but distinct. Then silence again. And then, the worst sound in the world when you're hiding. A human cough. Close. Outside the culvert. Followed by footsteps, slow and unhurried, as if whoever walked had all the time in the world. A voice spoke, female, low, not shouting. "Hey," it said, "I know you're in there." My blood froze. I didn't move, I didn't answer. I tried to become part of the concrete. The voice continued, patient, almost kind. "I'm not here to drag you out. I'm here because you took something that doesn't belong to you." The flash drive in my pocket suddenly felt like it was burning. "You found him," she said. "The courier." Courier. So he was a piece in a chain. "I know you're scared," she went on, "and I get it. I really do. But if you keep it, you'll die.
If you give it to me, you might live. A pause. Then, third night is the hardest, yeah? That's what they say. My throat tightened. How did she know? No, of course she knew. She was part of the plan. Or she'd read the same instructions, or she'd hunted enough people to learn what night does to them. I pressed my knuckles against my lips until they hurt. "Who are you?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The silence outside shifted, like she smiled. "Someone who wants to go home, like you." I hated how human that sounded. I hated that my brain, starving for connection, tried to believe it. Footsteps moved closer. "Listen," she said. "There are patrols on both sides. They don't ask questions first. They shoot, then decide what story to tell. You're in the middle, carrying evidence that makes people disappear. You think you can walk out with it? You can't." She crouched near the culvert entrance. I could see the shadow of her shape against the faint light. Small, hooded, a silhouette that could be a teenager, or a woman, or a boy. War erases age. "You're a volunteer," she said, "which means you still think rules matter." My jaw clenched. She wasn't wrong. "What's on it?" I asked. A tiny pause. "Names, routes, payments, proof." "Proof of what?" She exhaled softly. "Who's selling whom?" My stomach flipped again. Collaboration wasn't a headline here, it was an ecosystem. It lived in small compromises, a neighbor pointing at a house, a man trading fuel for safety, a mother whispering a rumor to keep her son from being taken. Everyone judged from far away. Up close, it was always messy. Her voice softened. "Give it to me, and I swear you'll see the morning." I could hear my own pulse like a drum. I could feel the heat of panic crawling up my neck. This was the moment the gray zone offers you. Trust a stranger, or trust your fear. Neither is safe. I thought of Lena's voice, of extraction, of plans drawn on screens in warm rooms. I thought of Pasha's cafe dream disappearing into a crater. I thought of the nurse's hands counting boxes, counting doses, counting lives. I also thought of the list. The list was not theoretical. If I handed the flash drive over, I might live, but who would die later because I did? If I kept it, I might die tonight, but the truth might survive me. My hands stopped shaking, not because I was brave, but because something inside me finally got tired of being hunted. I slid the flash drive out my pocket. I held it in my fist, wrapped in tape like a secret. "I'll trade," I whispered. "Information for information." She didn't laugh. That made her more dangerous. "What information?" "Tell me who set the extraction," I said. "Tell me if Lena knows." A long pause. Then her voice, quieter now. "Lena doesn't know. Not the whole thing. Someone above her. Someone she trusts." My throat tightened. "Then why is her name on the list?" "Because trust is a door, and they needed a key." The sound nearby, farther off this time, like radios crackling, men speaking in short, clipped phrases. The woman cursed under her breath. "They're close," she said. "You have 30 seconds to decide who you want to be, smart or dead." I stared into the culvert darkness, then towards her silhouette. I made a choice that still sits inside my ribs like a stone. "I'm neither," I said. "I'm tired." And I did something she didn't expect. I threw the flash drive, not to her, but past her, into the weeds. Her head snapped toward the sound. In that fraction of a second, while her attention shifted, I lunged out of the culvert and ran the other direction, low, fast, not heroic, just desperate. Behind me, she shouted something sharp. Footsteps crashed through grass. And then, from the road above, A voice barked in a language I won't write here because the words themselves still raise my blood pressure. A patrol.
Flashlights cut the night into slices. Someone yelled again, this time closer, angry. I dropped to the ground behind a pile of broken concrete, my lungs on fire, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't tell if I was cold or terrified. The patrol moved like they had done this 100 times, not rushing, not panicking, confident in their right to own the night. I watched 2 beams of light sweep the weeds where the flash drive had landed. One beam stopped. I saw a hand reach down. I heard the smallest sound, a strip of tape being peeled. The patrolman held up the flash drive like it was a trophy. The woman was still somewhere behind me, breathing hard. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her presence, like a knife held close. I realized with a sick clarity that my little act of defiance had not saved the truth. It had simply changed who would carry it. I was now a loose end, and loose ends are the easiest thing in war to cut. The third night began with me crawling through a drainage ditch, mud in my mouth, the sound of boots behind me, and the sound of my own fear inside me. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew where I couldn't be. Every time a flashlight beam swept near, I pressed my face into the dirt and became a lump of earth among other lumps of earth. The world narrowed to a few rules that weren't written anywhere but were etched into my nerves. Don't silhouette yourself. Don't breathe loud. Don't believe quiet means safe. At some point, the patrol moved past, chasing something else. Maybe the woman, maybe another shadow, maybe just their own suspicion. I kept moving until my arms felt like they belonged to someone older. I ended up near the school, the broken-toothed building I'd seen earlier. Its walls were cracked, the windows were empty. The playground swings creaked gently in the wind, like they were still waiting for children. Inside, the corridors smelled like damp paper and smoke. There were drawings on the wall, sunflowers, houses, a flag in bright colors someone had drawn before the world turned to ash. I found a classroom with desks stacked in a corner and a chalkboard still showing math problems. I sat on the floor and let myself shake. Not quietly, not politely. I shook like an animal, because that's what panic makes of you when it finally gets its turn. In that shaking, something else surfaced. Not fear, but anger. Not at the patrol, not at the woman. At the idea that my usefulness had been turned into a trap. At the fact that in this war, even kindness could be weaponized. I pulled out the list again, smoothing it on my knee with muddy fingers. I stared at the surnames until they blurred. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. The order. It wasn't random. It followed a route, a chain. Clinic to volunteer, to bridge watch, to coordinator, to pumping station. A line of human nodes. A network. And networks can be broken. I didn't have the flash drive anymore, but I still had the paper. Paper can be burned, paper can be hidden, paper can be delivered. And I still had one thing the people running this operation underestimated. I was not trained. I was not special. I was not predictable in the way professionals are predictable. I was a volunteer, which meant I could choose my own kind of stubborn. I tore the list in half. I hid one half beneath a loose floorboard in the classroom, under a rotting textbook, a message for whoever found it later, if anyone did. The other half I folded into a tight strip and tucked into my sock. Then I waited, because sometimes survival is not movement, sometimes it's enduring the urge to do something stupid. Hours passed, or minutes. Time again became unreliable. Near dawn, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, careful. A familiar voice whispered, "You're not invisible." The woman stepped into the doorway. Up close, she looked younger than her voice had sounded, early 20s maybe. Her face was smudged with soot.
Her eyes were the kind that had stopped expecting fairness. She didn't point a gun. She didn't need to. The way she stood told me she knew exactly how much danger she represented. They took it. You threw it right to them. I know, I said. She stared at me like she wanted to hate me, but didn't have the energy. You're going to die here, not because you're bad, because you're in the wrong story. Then change the story, I said. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, or maybe recognition. I stood slowly, hands open. I don't have the drive, but I have something, and I know enough now to hurt the people who set this up. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know who. I know it's not random. I know it's a network. She exhaled slowly. And what do you want? The simplest answer would have been to live, but the gray zone had done something to me by the third night. It had scraped away the clean lies. I want to not be used, and I want the nurse to not be on that list. Her gaze dropped, just for a second, a crack in the armor. Everyone's on a list, she said quietly. If not theirs, then someone else's. I looked at her, really looked. A young woman in a ruined school at dawn, negotiating survival like it was currency.
Why are you in this? I asked. Her jaw tightened. My father's on a list too. There it was, the moral compromise, the hostage you can't see. I can get you out, she said, and her voice sounded almost like she hated herself for offering. There's a gap in the patrol pattern, an hour, if we move now. Why help me? I asked. Because, she said, if they catch you, they'll make you talk, and then they'll come for me, and then they'll come for him. Fear makes alliances. I nodded once. Okay, I said, but we do it my way. Her eyes sharpened. There's no time for your way. There is, I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it was. I'm done sprinting into other people's plans. I reached into my sock and pulled out the strip of paper. Her gaze locked onto it. You kept part of the list. I did, I said, and I'm not giving it to you. Her hands tightened. I raised a finger. But I'll show you something. I unfolded it just enough for her to see the names. Lena, Pasha, the nurse. Her face tightened with a kind of grief that looked like anger. You see, I said, this isn't about sides, it's about control. She swallowed. I didn't soften. Softness gets misused. We leave, I said, and if I get out, I deliver this to someone who can protect them. If I die, I nodded toward the floorboard where I'd hidden the other half. It's still here, somewhere. The truth stays. For a moment, she looked at me like she wanted to call me naive. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. Fine, she said, your way. Outside, the sky was turning pale, like the world was reluctantly waking up. We moved through the school, down a stairwell, out a side door, staying low behind rubble and broken fences. She signaled with her hand when to pause, when to move. Her body knew the language of danger. We crossed a yard that used to hold flowers, now holding nothing but cold soil. A distant engine started up. She froze. I froze. Voices carried in the morning air. She leaned close and whispered, "Don't look at them." I didn't. I looked at a broken swing instead, and I thought, this is what trauma is. Not the explosion, not the blood. It's the way your brain assigns meaning to irrelevant objects because it can't bear to look straight at the thing that wants to kill you. We waited. The voices passed. Then we moved again. At the edge of the village, beyond the last ruined house, the fields opened. The land was flat, exposed, honest. She pointed toward a low line of trees in the distance. Past that, she whispered, there's a ditch that leads to safer. Safer wasn't safe, but it was a direction. We walked, bent against the wind, two figures in a landscape that didn't care who was right. Halfway there, she stopped abruptly. I followed her gaze. In the grass ahead, a small marker, faded paint,
A warning. Mines. My breath caught. She looked at me, eyes hard. Step where I step. I didn't argue. This wasn't a tutorial moment. This was a humility moment. I placed my foot exactly in the indent her boot left, and as we moved, slow and measured, the third night finally loosened its grip on my throat. Not because the danger was gone, but because I was no longer alone inside my panic. When we reached the ditch line, she let out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding. "Almost," she whispered. In the distance, I heard a sound that made my chest ache, a familiar burst of radio static. A voice, not Lena's, a soldier's voice, calling coordinates, calling for a check, calling for someone to respond. We were close enough to be heard by someone who still believed in lines. We slid into the ditch, muddy again, alive again, and I felt something dangerously like hope rise in me. The woman glanced at the strip of paper in my hand. "Don't forget," she said, "when you get out, you'll have to choose who to trust." I looked at her. "And you?" Her mouth tightened into something like a smile, something like resignation. "I'm still choosing," she said. Then she nudged me forward, toward the sound of the radio, toward the thin possibility of safety, toward a world where lists could be investigated instead of executed, toward morning. I didn't know if I would live past the next hour. I didn't know if Lena was a victim or a key. I didn't know if the truth on that flash drive would vanish into another pocket, another plan. But I knew this. Survival in the gray zone isn't about food or cold. It's about silence. It's about rules you don't know until they're breaking you. It's about deciding while your hands shake and your heart begs you to run, what kind of person you will be if you make it out. And if you don't, then at least you don't die carrying someone else's lie like it's your own. I kept moving, one step at a time, exactly where the footprints were.